Today's the second day of September. It's Friday. You made it.
It is Friday.
You made it, man.
I did.
That's definitely the truth. And so West Virginia played Pitt last night and lost by, a touchdown?
Mm-hmm.
But so your analysis is you feel like that good game?
I think it was a great game. I think if you look at the team last year, you look at how they played last night, they played intense, they played fast. I think we were very slow in a lot of our games the last couple of years. So I think it was a great game. I think the offensive game calling was the greatest we've seen in the Neil Brown era. West Virginia fans are the worst because, they complain about everything. Everything was a bad call. Everything was, the coach is the dumbest person in the world when most haven't even put on shoulder pads. But, Facebook's full of
critics,
the wannabe critics this morning. But, yeah, I think just simply by comparison, I think it was a great game. I think we can clearly see the changes that have been made, and I'm excited. I'm excited about this team. And I hate to say it like this because, there's a body of work that goes into what wins or loses a game. But, if a kid squeezes the ball on that pass and it doesn't end up going through his hands and making an interception, we win that game.
Right.
And, I think in the most recent years, we probably wouldn't have even been that close. So, yeah, I was very encouraged.
I thought so, too. I thought there for a while we could have won it,
I think, I think for the most part we did win it everywhere but the scoreboard.
Yeah.
I just think that one play gave Pitt what they needed to jump back in, and I hate it for the kid because I'm sure he's beating himself up all night long about it, and that's why I hate to say it like that. But you take that out of the equation, I think we win.
And I think that's one thing that people forget is when you said kid.
Yeah,
that's what they are.
Yeah,
these kids are kids.
18, 19, 20, 21 at the oldest, probably. So yeah,
and that kind of pressure, But I thought
you're that guy. What is it? I can't remember the school. There's a guy 32 years old. I don't know the whole story. I just caught the headline. But there's a guy 32 years old playing college football this year.
Oh, wow.
Which, your eligibility, if you've never been to school, your eligibility is still there no matter what your age is.
Yeah, that's NFL age.
I guess he's playing pretty good, too.
That is awesome. I'm trying to work through something, and you with your your expertise, I need some help on something.
Oh, boy.
It's like, okay, why do they have a T in tsunami? Why don't they leave it out? I mean, think about it. Why do they have
Are you leading up to a joke here?
No, I've been thinking about it. Why do they have a K in front of not? I mean, do you need it?
No.
Cannot. It's like, okay, picture Jesus doing this. He that knocketh at the door. I mean, he that not knocketh. And it's like, and I think about that stuff, and I'm thinking, another one, do you really need, what is it, pneumonia? Do you need a P in front of pneumonia? You don't. And it's like, I'm trying to work through this today. I need your counsel.
It's a Latin thing, and I've studied Latin 2 years worth just so I can understand the Bible better. But, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
Sam, you got any words of wisdom?
The logic. Oh gosh, you mentioned her on air. She's gonna kill you.
That she'd have to wait in line. There's other people in front of her. That's so funny. That's a hoot. Well, let's see. Hold on a minute. He that. Okay. Let's see here. Okay. So it would be like Revelation 3:20. It's like, here I am, I stand at the door and can knock. I mean, why would you use that? And so, it's like, I don't know. I've just been kind of thinking about that today. My daughter-in-law sent me video about that, and I thought, well, I've got to figure out how that works. So, part 2 of Behind the Hedge, consider Job, consider Job, part 2. Very good, awesome. Still working through some things. You mentioned a lot about the children last week. About his kids, and I wrote down a lot of questions here.
Oh boy!
And it's like,
remember, I'm still on my first cup of coffee, so take it easy on me.
I know, and I didn't even make you coffee this morning. You made your own coffee today.
I did.
I'm amazed. So we are the heritage of our children.
Yeah. No, our children are
our heritage. So if that is true, how good a job are we doing as a church? How good a job are we doing in that aspect now?
Well, I think it depends. Taking your kids to church is vital.
Right.
They need. I remember our kids when we were going and they were getting to that age where, church is boring and this and that and the other and so forth. Why do we go? Why do we do it when others don't and everything else? And I would always have this answer, because this is who we are.
Right.
And I always felt that it was important to show that we are resolute in our faith, and we are resolute in our attendance, and we are resolute in how important and the priority this has in our life.
Right.
So I think that is vital, because if your kids don't see you practicing what you preach, they're going to fall away. If they see you one way in church and see you a completely different way in the public or in the home or wherever, that's going to resonate more to your kids than going to church on Sunday mornings.
Right.
So I think it's a holistic approach, and that's Dobson's theory. It's a holistic approach in that, you need to be the example, foremost and forthright in your home. You need to have clear definitions on why you go to church, why you believe what you believe, and how you live. And then you have to take those steps into practicing that. Don't just let your kids hear it, let your kids see it and understand it. But then there's also the influence of the world and society. And that's a reality that we have to be strong. And this is what Job was actually trying to hedge his kids about, is understanding that even the best upbringings, even the most moral approach to life, temptation can still bear witness to our kids away from the things of God. And, that's where spirituality comes in. And we see from Job took it to the next level. Job didn't just go to church, right? Job didn't just pray before meals, right? Job intercessed, for his kids. He went to battle for their soul. He took no chance that they weren't doing it for themselves. He took the battle for them to ensure that spiritually they were where they needed to be, and protected spiritually. So many of us try to protect our kids physically, right? But Job saw, and Job understood, and Job realized, protecting them physically, making sure they've got a roof over their head and money in the bank and all of these things that we, pursue in this life is the minor battle. The larger battle is the spiritual battle. And, Job let them have their life. Job provided a heritage and an inheritance for them.
Right.
But he didn't stop there. And a lot of us stop there. A lot of us feel like, our kids are good people. Good's Good's not going to win the spiritual war.
No.
You know, and so he went to battle spiritually for them. And I think, I mean, we all know what happens, and I think that's where Job had his peace in all of that, is that he knows.
Mm-hmm.
He went to war spiritually for his kids, and he knows that his kids were given everything spiritually that they could possibly have.
Right.
And I think he found confidence in that. A lot of times our fear and our worry for our kids is because we have fallen short preparing them for the world and covering them spiritually for the world. We do a good job physically, but we don't do that great a job spiritually.
You know, I looked over at when
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Oh yeah, when you were talking about that, I looked at verse 5 of Job chapter 1, and let me give you what the New Living Translation says here. It says, "And these celebrations ended, sometimes after several days. Job would purify his children. He would get up early in the morning and offer a burnt offering for each of them. For Job said to himself, perhaps my children have sinned and have cursed God in their hearts. This was Job's regular practice," is what it says.
Yep.
So my question is this. Okay.
Well, and notice, he made them come.
Yeah, because they were there too.
This wasn't just a closet experience between him and God.
Right.
He made them come.
Right.
Right? And that's why I tell everyone I really struggle getting my kid to come to church and everything else. I like drag them.
Yeah.
Drag them. Make them come.
Yeah.
Make them come. And when they get there, and you know, there's the responsibility of the church. I mean, that first question we could break down all day long, because there's a responsibility of the church. You know, if parents are already dragging their kids to church, then when they get to church, we need to make it worthwhile. You know, we need to make it fun, but also spiritually engaging.
Right.
And give the parents the support they need once they get the kids there. And so a million ways to answer that question.
So maybe if the church is doing the job that they should have, that they should do, and have good programs for the children, then maybe they won't have a drug problem. And I'm not talking about like a substance abuse problem. I'm talking about literally drug to church, because you've heard people say, well, I had a drug problem, because they drugged me to church. It would be more so if I want to go.
Yes.
Because there's something exciting. My friends are there. We're going to learn God's word. We're going to have fun. We're going to be goofy, and that kind of thing, and learn stuff like that with it. And a lot of churches today are stuck in the mud that they think that whatever the parents are doing, the kids should do too. They should sit in the sanctuary too. Although there is a time that kids need to be in the sanctuary and learn reverence and that kind of thing. But they're kids. Yeah. And people forget that.
We start that with our high schoolers. Our high schoolers are in the service on Sunday, and I would be fine if once a month Luke said, "Hey, I want to take the youth out and do this once a month on Sunday morning." I'd be fine with that. Not suggesting it, but just saying I'd be fine with that. But yeah, I think by high school, you're being equipped at school to enter the world.
Right.
So by high school, you better be being equipped at home, and you better be being equipped at church to step in the world and to, be a kingdom citizen as you do.
When whose fault is this? Not on the notes or anything. Okay. There was an election 4 years ago, 8 years ago, whenever Hillary ran. Okay. Yep. Okay. And so when she ran for office and got beat, there were people in the colleges, there were students in the colleges that had meltdowns to where they had to have therapy dogs. Okay, and that kind of thing. Why? Okay, I was talking to a guy about this the other day, in part 2 on the question here. When we were growing up, we heard nothing about test anxiety. No. You were just nervous before a test. It's understandable. Yeah. But I hear this thing being thrown around so much. And so where did this start? Did this start at the home we're therapy dogs and all this kind of stuff. And did we start catering to our kids and saying, "Oh, honey, it's okay"? Or I mean, where did we go wrong?
Another question with a million answers. So let me put it in context of this series. I don't think as parents we are going to war spiritually for our kids,
like Job was doing. In verse 5.
So I think it starts there. You know, we could point a million fingers at we babied our kids too much. We wanted our kids to have more than we had. I mean, you know, you can look at a million different philosophies, but you know, and some are right and some are wrong, and some are probably in between. But I think it really comes down to the point. I don't think we're going to war spiritually for our kids. I think we're making sure they get to practice. We're making sure they have the right clothes to wear. We're making sure of all of these other worldly things that at the end of the day really mean nothing. You know, and you know, we can break that down a million ways. Is it because we weren't the athlete we wanted to be, so we wanted our kids to be that athlete? And so on and so on and so on. But I think it's just simple. How many people do you see going to war like Job did?
Right.
For the spiritual welfare. Had nothing to do, if you read why Job did it, it had nothing to do with their physical well-being, right? The account tells us they had their own homes.
Right.
They had the money and capability of putting their own food on the table to you know, drink and eat with one another. So they had good relationships with each other, so much so that instead of ignoring their female sisters, like, you know, most did in that day, they welcomed them and joined them in. There's no record that any weirdness was going on or this and that. I've heard people try to imply, well, by inviting the sisters, no, it doesn't say that. Right. You're adding to. Right. And adding to, you know,
get you in trouble.
Puts you in big trouble.
Yeah.
And so no, it says nothing like that. So, you know, we see that Job's kids physically are well taken care of.
Right.
Whether it was Job, whether it was the kids went out and got good jobs and did it themselves, whether they worked for dad and did well for themselves, it doesn't really tell us that. But we see they're well taken care of physically, right? And a lot of times we're content with that in today's life. We're content with the physical needs being met, and we feel like we've done a good job. Job went to war spiritually. I mean, I talk all the time about we're meant to be the aggressors. He was the aggressor spiritually on behalf of his kids. He was not leaving it up to them to maintain their own spirituality.
Right.
He went to war for them. I mean, get this. They're in their own home.
Right.
Having each other over, having dinner, and everything else. And Job thinks to himself, oh, no, what if Satan crept in?
Right.
I'm not going to allow this. So he picks up the phone and he calls them and he says, hey, have fun tonight and enjoy each other's fellowship. But tomorrow morning, be at the house because we're laying up sacrifice.
Right.
And guess what? They came. No whining, no screaming, no kicking, no complaining, no murmuring, and everything else. They were there because they honored their father.
Right.
Right? They were there. Right? And I think it's interesting that the wife isn't there, which we'll talk about this week. But, and, you know, maybe she was, but she's not mentioned. I mean, why didn't it say Job and his wife?
Right.
Right? So it's you know, I think there's definite implications there. But, you know, he went to war spiritually.
Right.
You know, and I'll see people break the bank to make sure they get the kids the right cleats or whatever, right? And I've got nothing against sports. My kids played sports. My kids played travel sports, everything else like that. I've got no issue with that. But they knew church was the priority, and they knew Jesus Christ was the priority over those things. So much so that when it became an every day, 7-day-a-week thing, Luke, who was the one who played travel, came to me, and he came to me. I didn't come to him. He came to me and said, Dad, I'm not in church at all anymore. I'm not in youth group. I'm not engaged in the school like I was, which was a Christian school, and everything else. And I can't just keep doing this. So he knew, right? He knew he was missing what God wanted for his life. I didn't have to tell him. I didn't have to drag him to that. I didn't have to beat it into him, because I like to think, hopefully, and I'm not bragging about it, but I like to think I did a good job up to that point, along with Sam, to, instill in them, these are the priorities. And when that priority was slacking, he realized it and knew it and made a decision to fix it.
So let me ask you something. Okay, back when we were playing sports, we didn't play. Football. Like I played football for Midwestern, and so that started after church. That's how they scheduled it, on Sunday afternoon. It was not early that morning. It was later on in the day.
I never knew you played football.
1 year.
I'm learning something.
I played ice hockey. I changed from that and went to ice hockey.
Yeah, hockey did not go well for me.
Oh, I loved hockey. It was about the
Ever
only
tell you
sport.
That story?
No, it was about the only sport I was any good at was ice hockey. Yeah. And but I loved it and can still skate to this day. But those guys are crazy. I'm not getting up there on Sunday afternoon with those guys. They play. Okay, so if you have, so we can say this as a church. We can say, well, back in the day when I was going to school, they didn't have sports on Sunday, or they didn't have sports on Wednesday night. Okay, so that's crept in, and that's full-fledged in bloom. Okay, so what does the church...
And we haven't blinked an eye.
Haven't blinked an eye. So what does the church do? How does the church cater to the sports parents and the sports kids? Do you have a separate service for them on a different night? Well, they practice that night. They're practicing all the time. How do we as a church, or is it our responsibility to
No, I don't think it's our responsibility. I think it's the parents' responsibility. We've moved our youth service to Sunday nights because it's the least
busy
used night of the week. I mean, it's still used. I mean, we still have kids coming from games or coming from practices and whatever. But so we did make that concession. It's not like we're like, okay, it's Wednesday night or bust. It's like, no, we need to minister to these kids, and we need to find the best opportunity for it. So that's why we do Sunday nights. But I don't think if a kid's not there, it's not the church's fault. Right? We can't control that. If it were up for me, I'd go pick every single one of them up from wherever they are and get them there, because I believe in it that strongly. But again, that's not really our responsibility. It wasn't Job's next door neighbor's responsibility to offer sacrifice for them. It wasn't the synagogue's responsibility to offer sacrifice for Job's kids. It was Job's.
Right. Yeah. So, and you've seen this as well as I do, and I know that I'm treading here, but when you think about this, it's like, okay, my kid's going to play sports, and they're going to probably not get a scholarship. And at the end of the day of the game, it's a game, and you go home, and that's normally the way it is. Okay, so you keep a child out of church for so long, and then they start to live wrong because they're not getting Jesus in them. They're not getting taught at home. And then how many phone calls have you had that says, I need you to help fix my kid?
Mm-hmm.
But the parents are the ones that let them play sports on Sunday afternoon, or they weren't in church, but they want the pastor to fix it. Is there something wrong with that?
Well, I think there is. I mean, I don't get a lot of those calls, but I see a lot of families in struggle,
right?
Because, as a whole, there's more dissension in the family unit than there is, than there is spiritual warfare.
Right.
And I think that's the problem. I mean, every household is different. So I mean, it's tough to sit here and diagnose and put our finger on and say this is the problem. Sports is the problem. Well, no, I don't think sports is the problem. Right. If we would stand up to coaches and sports and everything else and saying, no, my kids won't be here during this time, that's church.
Right.
If we would all do that, they would make concessions.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But we didn't do that. Why? Because, we want scholarships and we want them to be the popular kid, and we want all of those things. We want them to be happy. Mm-hmm. Right? Forget everything else. Ultimately, we just want our kid to be happy. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But we have, kind of like what I said in the very beginning, we have to make sure the kids understand the priorities.
Right.
Jesus is priority number one, even above the church. Right? Yeah. Church is priority number two, right? In putting yourself in a body of believers that's going to enhance your spiritual walk.
Right.
And challenge you to walk spiritually and so forth. And then everything else is after that.
Right.
Right? And, so I think it's creating that priority system that, hey, play all the basketball you want, play all the sports that you want, play all this and that and the other, that you want. For instance, and I hate saying things like this because different people can put the two and two together as I know who you're talking about, but Luke played basketball in school, and for almost every Thanksgiving, he had practice Thanksgiving morning. And we just worked around it and whatnot and made it work and so forth. And finally, because Luke was a scrappy player. He wasn't the most gifted athlete at basketball. He was gifted in other things, but at basketball, he was that guy who was going to fight you tooth and nail for a rebound, and get the ball to his scorers. He wasn't a shooter. He wasn't a scorer or anything like that. But he knew his role. He played his role well, but he always had to work extra hard. So he was always afraid of missing those practices. And, I just made the decision senior year, no, we're not doing this. This is Thanksgiving. We're gonna do Thanksgiving. We're not gonna do basketball. So I said, no, not happening.
Right.
And then other parents found out, nope, Luke's not going. Oh, really? Well, then so-and-so's not going. That's your decision, not mine. I'm not creating a coup whatsoever here. Right. I'm managing my household. Right. You do your thing. And everything. Ended up, the practice was canceled.
Because you stood up?
Maybe it was just enough for everyone to kind of take a step back and be like, oh, yeah, let's go ahead and cancel. Right. Whatever. I mean, I'm not it was good people doing that, so I'm not picking a fight here at all. Sure. But what I'm saying is, and most high school kids don't get up and watch the Macy's Days Parade, so they're probably thinking no big deal. Dinner's not till later, whatever. Right. So I'm not trying to judge or point a finger on that. But what I'm saying is, if we stand up for what we believe is important, in life, and we create that priority system within our kids as well, then taking the stand isn't as hard. And I think people will react to it much better than we think, because pretty much everyone's just doing what everyone else does. Mm-hmm. Coaches are just doing, I'm practicing on Wednesday and I'm practicing on Sundays because everyone else is.
Right.
All right? They understand that you have a priority system and that you'll give 110% Monday through Saturday, but Sunday belongs to God. Mm-hmm. And you make that clear. I think in the end they're going to respect you a whole lot more than they're going to resent you.
Yeah. You're listening to Pastor Jay Mace from the Pulse Church in Winfield, along with myself, Pastor John Fowler from Gasaway. We're talking about Jay's message, which is part 2, Behind the Hedge, considering Job. And when you think about this question that or the statement that you said, I really gave some thought to this. It says, what can I get by with and make it to heaven?
Isn't that how we live?
Where's the line? Where's the line?
Isn't that how we live? It shouldn't matter where the line is.
Yeah.
Right? It shouldn't matter. Right? I mean, I think that's part of the problem. And something that has always really stuck with me in Scripture is the disciples followed him. Right?
Right.
For what? 3 years-ish?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Followed him. Ate with him. Slept with him. Starved with him. Whatever the situation.
You see that on the on Chosen, man.
Yeah, I mean, it really brings it to light. I mean, that wasn't a glamorous lifestyle at all. But they followed him. They were faithful, and they stuck with him.
Right.
In all of that. But there came a point, and there came a time when on multiple occasions, Jesus' teaching makes the comment, but when you're converted. That's what he told Peter in the upper room that night. It's what he said when he was talking to them about the last days and the friction that comes, and the disunity between the body of Christ and everything else. He basically says, and I'm paraphrasing big time. Chris did a great job in our men's group Monday night bringing this out. And he said, but when you're converted, you won't act like that. You won't think like that. You won't live like that. And I think that's a huge piece that we miss today, right? Is we believe, right? We follow,
mm-hmm.
right? But the minute we begin to have to sacrifice or compromise worldliness,
mm-hmm.
then we start rationing, counting the cost, and determining just how much do I have to do, just how much do I have to give to get to heaven. Right? Why? Because, we only want that. It's kind of like we're no different than the prodigals. We want the Father's stuff,
right? But
we don't want the Father. And I think the point Jesus was making to the disciples is, when you're converted, you're going to want me above everything else. You're going to want me above everything else.
Right.
And, and that's a spiritual awareness and a spiritual drive and a spiritual anointing that doesn't come through one-time faith.
Right.
Right? It comes by seeking the face of God and choosing it over everything else.
Right.
Right? And I think we bring ourselves just close enough. Just close enough to feel good about our position in heaven. Right? And I think we miss the point where it says, I've done this, I've done that, I've checked this box, I've checked that box. I've done all of these things in your name.
Right.
And he still says, depart because I didn't know you.
Right.
And I think that's what Job really shows us the difference. Job really shows us that, there's a step beyond church to spirituality. And it's making sacrifices. It's falling on our face in front of our kids and praying for their spirituality. This isn't just about getting to heaven. Right. It's about becoming heaven-like. Right. This walk that we're on. It's about becoming heaven-like. And so that's where that comes from.
So when you think about, okay, it's like I had a person ask me one time about backsliding, and about once in grace, always in grace, because, you hear that story every so often, it comes up. So what, at what point does a person lose their salvation? And I always say this, it should never be an issue to where you have to determine, like you say, where is the line? It should never be an issue.
Yeah.
It's like you're either all in or all out.
Yeah, agreed.
And so, as you think through the process of this, what does it mean that parents should overflow into their children? What does that mean?
It means I should be so full of Jesus and his teachings and his promises and live it. Don't just preach it, but live it such that my kids get it. I mean, we can overflow a lot of stuff.
Right.
And it be good stuff. When I turned my life around, I was such a scoundrel. I believed I had to do everything good, to right that wrong, all those wrongs. And, I was in the American Family Association. I was in West Virginia Right to Life. I was in all of this stuff and everything else. I was a youth pastor. I was preaching revivals. I was doing all of this stuff. But I wasn't really mastering any of them. And I had a mentor come to me and say, "Where's Jesus in all of this for you?"
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that the things you're doing aren't good. They are good. They're important, right? But what were you called to do?
Right.
So we can overflow a lot of stuff. I love football. I'm a big football fan, and this time of year, Luke's a big football fan too, and we talk a lot of football and everything else like that. But I like to think I have overflowed a whole lot more Jesus into my kids by the way I live, not just the way I preach and talk and everything, but by the way I live. I like to think I've overflowed a whole lot more Jesus than I have football, because you can overflow a lot of stuff. We can be obsessive about a lot of stuff and a lot of stuff that's good and never get our kids to Jesus. We can get our kids to good sports programs. We can get our kids to good money situations. We can get our kids to good education. We can get our kids to all of these things by overflowing those things in our home and in our life. But man, if Jesus isn't at the top of the priority list and church right behind it, we're still failing our kids. I don't care how good we have set them up with earthly things.
Right.
We have still failed them spiritually. And I think Job sets a very strong, example for us to follow in that.
So if we're overflowing into our children, then there's also that opportunity to be a stumbling block for them as well.
Absolutely.
And so that stumbling, when I think about a stumbling block, I think about, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, once it's out. And so when I think about, being a stumbling block, it's like showing anger in front of them, getting, I'm talking belligerent, talking down, being belligerent to the children's mother, that kind of thing, because that becomes a learned behavior.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. And so, when they're mad, how do you act, in your business dealing and those kind of things. And so parents have to be so careful, and still yet, I mean, even though yours are grown, mine are grown, you still have to be that example of not to become a stumbling block to your child.
Yeah.
And I think that we see a lot of that today. So there's a lot of responsibility on parents, and there's also responsibility on children. I told somebody the other day, their child is like 4 years old and never been in church. And I said, "You're 4 years behind."
Mm.
And she said, "What do you mean?" I said, "You're 4 years behind." I said, "If you'd have started day one with your child in," I said, "so there's some catching up to do."
Yeah.
And so, I think about that, about telling that person that, because, we definitely do not want to be a stumbling block to our children in any way, shape, or form, but we want to be godly for them. And to see God do great things in them.
And I think that's the point in Job. Job was taking no chance.
Right.
He knew nothing was promised, right? And he knew, it could all be taken away. We see that resolve in him later, when he begins losing all of these things. And he said, "The Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away." Job was so wrapped up into his godliness and into, his spirituality and because of of the dedication and overflow that he put into it, that it flowed out of him. And even the ugliest and most horrible of situations, it flowed out of him, right? And I'm a big believer in, you want to see who a person really is? Make them mad.
Yeah.
Want to see who a person really is? Make them mad. And they'll show you who they really are, because the mask will come off. Now, I'm not. Don't misunderstand me. I am not. Let me look at the camera. I am not saying go out and deliberately make people mad today. That is not my point.
Run a disclaimer.
But my point is, when people are mad, or when people are pushed out of their comfort zone, whatever it is, that's when you see the real person.
Mm-hmm.
That's when they make the little pop shots, and that's when they run their mouth. That's when their facial expressions change, and all of these things. And I remember saying to somebody one time, "Be careful, your devil's showing."
Oh wow.
Yeah, and we have to be careful with those very things, because that's part of the overflow.
Right.
That's part of the overflow. Our cup can run over with bad stuff.
Yeah.
Not just the good, right? But Job gives us examples of pursuing the goodness of God in all that we do, so that it flows fully into all of those around us, most especially our children.
One of the things, are you going to preach Job chapter 3?
No, I'm really focusing on Behind the Hedge. I'm focusing on all that Job did prior to all that took place.
Okay.
Because I think if we don't understand the Behind the Hedge portion of Job's life, then we don't get at all how he handled the despair, how he handled the hurt, how he handled the pain, how he handled, a reprobate wife, how he handled, bad friends, in the midst of all of his pain and loss, how he handled all of that for God the way that he did. Plus, it also shows us that he was able to approach God on a very, excuse me, coffee talking. He was able to approach God on a very bold level because of his intimacy with God, right? And I think we miss that. We miss the element of comfort Job had with God because of their intimacy, that Job was able to have these conversations with God, and God was able to push back, and Job receive it, and not become a little pouty, whiny thing like a lot of us do when the Lord pushes back on us, and or some mentor or spiritual leader pushes back on us and everything else, and instead of growing in that moment, we regress, we become whiny and pouty and everything, and it hurts our spiritual walk.
Right.
So I'm right now. I mean, God can move however He wants to move, but right now there's 2 more sermons to go with what I have outlined, and we're going to focus solely on Behind the Hedge.
Yeah, one of the things that I've read in like chapter 3. Okay, when you go back to chapter 1. Okay, chapter 1, verse 1. It says he was perfect and upright. Okay, but then I've heard this all my life, and tell me what you think this is. Okay, he says in verse 25 of chapter 3, he says, "For the things which I greatly feared is come upon me, and that which I was afraid is come upon me." So what he greatly feared and what was he was afraid of came upon him. What do you think that fear was, and what was he afraid of? Was it about family?
Well, I think it was everything. I mean, we know the story. Job lost it all.
Yeah.
He lost his money. He lost his children. He lost everything, but a grumpy wife. you know.
I got an old buddy of mine. He always called his mother-in-law an old battle axe.
Yeah.
The old battle axe.
I'm not saying every wife is a grumpy old wife, but I'm saying his was a grumpy old wife. So don't add to. But he basically lost everything, but the things that didn't edify who he was. His kids edified who he was. They were his heritage. They were his blessing. His money and his riches. Well, it doesn't really say money, but his substance, which is how Scripture refers to it. His substance. His home, his land, his cattle, his sheep, all of the things that he had. Mm-hmm. His substance in those days made him what we would consider a rich man today, with money in the bank or whatever. So he had all of these things, and he earned all of these things by being that perfect and upright man. Mm-hmm. And that's why we started with verse 1 in this series, because it showed us that nobody, even in his business dealings or whatever it was, he built his substance on being perfect and upright. Right. There was no one that could cast a stone at all on Job. Yeah. None. No one could say he got mad and showed himself. No one could say he was prideful. No one could say he was, a jerk. No one could say any of those things. What could they say? He was perfect and upright in all of his dealings. Right. In all of his dealings, he was perfect and upright, and he abhorred evil. I mean, so much so that it made him physically ill to think that that he would transgress against God. And, so this is a mindset. This is a behind-the-hedge mindset, right? And remember what we said in the first message, right? God didn't build the hedge. No. Job built the hedge by pursuing God, by chasing God, by wanting everything godly in his life above everything else. And so when we look at all of that in perspective and then take it to chapter 3, everything, I think Job was saying that he feared that everybody around him and everything around him wouldn't be on that same spiritual level as he was. And it wasn't a prideful thing. It wasn't a, ooh, look at me kind of thing. But I think it was, everything around me. Why did he hedge his kids? Why was he working so hard to hedge his kids? Right? Because it says he was afraid that maybe sin had entered in while they were having their fellowship with the brother and sisters, right? And so what we see in that is Job was like, no, I'm not giving that an opportunity. I'm going to hedge that. Well, it doesn't really tell us his kids' age, but they were in their own homes. They had their own substance, right? So much so that they were inviting each other over for dinner and everything else like that. So you would think that they were adults in some manner. Why weren't they hedging themselves? Right. Yeah. Right? At this point in their life, they should be overflowed into enough that they're choosing the things of God and not the things of the world. Right? Which means there's no guarantees for any of us. Right? Job was perfect and upright, feared God and eschewed evil. He was God's guy. Right. And God knew it. And Satan knew it. Amen? I said the other day, I would much rather demons fear me than to have claws. Oh, yeah. Right? Okay, great, you're clapping for me, but, are you going to be, hollering for Barabbas next week? Fickle. Because that's the world. But, I would much rather demons fear me than to have the applause of man. Job lived that kind of life, right? And it wasn't just marketing speak. Let me put this out on the Facebook page because right. It was life for Job. It was lifestyle for Job. So I think Job in chapter 3. Remember, I mean, he'd been punched in the face. And in the gut and in every way of his life. And, he was hurting and he was in pain. And I think Job was sitting back and realizing that he had God, but he was concerned and overwhelmed with the thought that maybe it was only him. And I don't know. Just off the cuff, that's my best response to
that. Yeah, because, it's like you got to be careful what you voice out there, because, what you fear, can come up on you. And so you have to be real careful there. Okay, final comment or final question here of today. It's amazing how fast time goes today. Do we chase God or does God chase us?
I think it's a bit of both. I mean, Scripture tells us that he stands at the door and knocks. So I think that's a level of chasing.
Canucks,
yeah. People are just tuning in going, what does that mean? So I think there's a level of chasing for God. I mean, clearly he left the splendor of heaven to come and die for us. That's definitely chasing.
Right.
But I think there comes a point where being saved just isn't good enough. And we want to seek the kingdom of heaven. We want to think like him and act like him and walk like him. And that's when I talk about God chasers. And again, I'll plug Tommy Tenney's book. He needs to send me some money for that. But if you haven't read that book from years ago, that book's probably 30 years old.
Probably. Now you met him at Promise Keepers, right?
I did once. Yep. If you haven't read that book, I strongly, strongly, strongly recommend it. I think I've loaned it out 100 times and never got it back, and I rebuy it just so I have it if I ever want to go back to it. But what he shows us in that book is how the disciples and others were content with being with Jesus. Right? So we can kind of couple that to going to church, having a good feeling at church, leaving church with a good feeling, and it getting us through to the next week. Right? And then they get hit with all of the stuff, and they flee, they run, they scatter. Right?
Yeah.
24 hours earlier, we'll die for you,
right?
And then when the fear hits, then when the reality hits that, this could cost me even my life. It had already cost them everything. Most of them had lost their homes. They'd lost their jobs and everything else. And they literally lived a life trusting day to day what God would provide for them. And here they are, running back to everything they knew. And I always go back in situations like this to that moment on the shore, when I was just thinking, when Peter took his clothes off and dove into the water and everything else. Someone asked me one time, what do you think he swam to the shore naked? What's the significance in that? I said, well, the significance is he didn't want the robe to weigh him down and drown him.
Yeah.
So he just wanted to get to shore without living. I don't know that there's exactly, you could talk about nakedness and we're naked before God, and you could parallel it to the Garden of Eden and all of those things if you want to. I really just think it was simple. He threw his cloak off because he didn't want to drown. And, that.
Yeah, because he'd already been down that road before.
Yeah,
so, it's like he learned.
And so he swam to shore. But, you could make parallels to that. I'm not arguing against that. But, and so they ate, caught a big load. Brought it to shore, ate till they were full, everything. And then Jesus has this moment with Peter. And I refer to this a lot because I think it's a powerful moment, and it's exactly what we're talking about here, right? They were excited and they were thrilled because they were with Jesus again, right?
Mm-hmm.
But Jesus is getting ready to lower the load, so to speak. And they had choices to make.
Yeah.
And for years I stumbled over this. For years I'm like, why did it matter? And Jesus asked, do you love me more than these? And for years I'm thinking Jesus is asking about the other disciples. Do you love me more than these? And then one day, I like to kind of create my own movie or TV show in my head while I'm reading scripture, just so I can, I can kind of taste it. I can kind of get the grippingness of what was going on and everything else. And so one day I'm just kind of laying there and I'm praying about this, and I'm recanting the scripture through my head. And I'm kind of creating my own movie and everything else. And just in my own little head movie, I have this moment where Jesus goes, "Do you love me more than these?" And his hand almost pointed to the boat and stuff that was out in the water. I'm like, holy crap. Yes, I said, holy crap. He's not talking about the other disciples. He's talking about the fish. He's talking about everything that Jesus pulled him away from, that he ran back to.
Right.
And allowed himself to absorb himself back into because of the present absence of a physical Jesus.
Right.
Right? So when we go back to what we shared earlier about the conversion, this was the conversion moment for Peter.
Right.
When Jesus is saying, "Do you love me more than this world? Do you love me more than the boats? Do you love me more than the nets? Do you love me more than the fish? Do you love me more than these things?" And Peter's like, "Yes, Lord, I do." And he said, "Feed my lambs." And he said lambs first. That's significant. But he said, "Feed my lambs." And then he asked him 2 more times. And Peter's begging, because Peter knows his denial, and he knows what he did, and he knows, that he's not, fishing for men. He's fishing for fish, right? Everything that God had brought into his life had vanished when the physical Jesus vanished, and so forth. And Jesus is giving him the command to go, and preach the gospel ultimately, and in this moment, and it converts him. Yeah. The light bulb goes off, and it converts him, and he realizes, there is more of you in me than there is in the world, Romans, right? There's more of you in me than there is in the world. And yes, I will feed your lambs. Yes, I will feed your sheep. Yes, I will preach your gospel. This is a conversion moment where it wasn't just about the feel-good relationship with Jesus, but it was about the intimacy and overflow of God in his life. And leveling up, as the world would say today, in his pursuit of Jesus. That's when Peter became a God chaser. Right. He was a hanger-outer.
He
right. He was hanging out with Jesus and loving every minute of it.
Yeah.
Right. It was in this moment that he became a God chaser.
Right. That is so powerful. Wow, that's good stuff. Here's what I'm sitting here. I looked up that book's like $12.59. I don't know how they got that on Amazon. It's $12.59.
All price.
Yeah. But even after all these years, that's a pretty good deal.
Yep.
I've got one in Gasway, and I need to reread that, and I want to read all through Job, and just challenge myself to read all of Job and finish and reread that God Chaser.
Yeah.
Because I think it's an awesome book. If you can get that, I encourage you to do that. So what's going on in Winfield?
We are there's a lot going on. We've got our women's group are getting ready to go to their first conference, and they've got a fundraiser that will finish up this Monday on Labor Day. We're going to pull the winner of their fundraiser
Where are they going?
$500, $450, $500 worth, give or take, of gift cards.
Oh, cool.
And it's $5 for a ticket or 5 tickets for $20. So if you're interested, message me or message one of the ladies in the church, and they can get those for you. They're raising money for that. They're going to Pigeon Forge, and it's the Women of Joy conference.
Oh, cool.
Read a lot of good things, heard a lot of good things about it. So we're excited for them. Our goal is that the men and women alternate. So this, with ladies first. So the women are going this year, and then next year we're hoping that our men can attend a conference as well. And so we're doing that. So they're raising money for that. We're also within the church raising money to replace our air conditioner. We had air conditioning unit for our worship center went out, so we're also doing that. So I knew a few weeks ago when we started the series and we kind of called out, Satan, and I made the comment that, I'm not tempted by the things that I used to be tempted of.
Mm-hmm.
Now Satan, works to annoy me and frustrate me and hinder me more than he does tempt me. Because the things that used to work for me temptation-wise don't work for me at that level anymore. So, he tries to disrupt in other ways. Well, as soon as that came out of my mouth, I was like, oh, here it goes. Satan's going to try to disrupt, and he certainly is. But, man, I am thankful for a wonderful group of people.
Yes.
That just bind together, work together, work for the common good of coming up with solutions and the right solution, not just jumping on anything and so forth. So, I'm thankful for them and all of the work that they've put into it this week to get us in a good place. And, it looks like hopefully not by this Sunday, so still wear your shorts and stuff this Sunday, but by next Sunday we should, we're expecting to be in a pretty good place with that again.
Absolutely. So, hey, that's good stuff.
All the normal stuff, Monday nights, men and women's group. Sunday nights is our 356, our teens.
What'd you say, Sam? Monday's canceled.
Oh, yeah, it's Labor Day this week. So we're canceled this week, but most Mondays is men and women's group. But, yeah, this Monday is Labor Day.
I got you. Yeah, it is, isn't it? Man.
Yeah, I did not realize. We usually have our family fun day the first Sunday of each month, and I've just been so consumed with so many things until someone said that the other day. I was just like, oh, crap, it's first Sunday. I had no clue. So.
I think it's supposed to rain, so it may be a good thing.
Is it?
Yeah, it's supposed to. Yeah, I think that it's Monday, 70% chance scattered thunderstorms. Maybe not. Gotcha. Who knows? Well, I tell you what, if you're not where you need to be with Jesus, you can fix this right now. All you have to do is ask him to forgive you of your sins. We never want to have a podcast that we're not asking you to examine your life and to find out where you are with Jesus. If you're not where you need to be with him, you can change this right now. Just say, Father, forgive me of my sins. Come into my life and live. And at that point, he forgives you, and you move forward, and you press, and you need to forget your history. Stop living in your history, and start living in the now and planning for the future of what God has for you. Jeremiah 29:11. Read that one. It's a great scripture. He knows he has a plan for your life, and an expected end. So I want to encourage you today. Let me tell you something. God is on the move in the Pulse Church. We're excited about what he's doing. We've got the Winfield campus, the Gasway campus, planning on a launch of a new campus in Charleston the first quarter of next year at Easter Sunday of 2023 with Rich and Olivia Anderson. So we're really excited about that. So we need your prayers. We need your support. And we're just believing for God to do great things in this ministry. You want to help on this air conditioning, getting it replaced. You can text the word PULSE to 1-304-244-3187. You can go to thepulsechurch.com, give through PayPal, or you can mail your love gift to P.O. Box 561, Eleanor, Eleanor, West Virginia, 25070. Give, and I promise you will be blessed. Pray you have a great weekend. We'll see you. Even though Monday is a holiday, I'll still be here. Yeah, bless my heart. I'll still be here doing a podcast. So we'll see you on Monday beginning at 8 a.m. for the next edition of the Pulse WV Live. Have a great day, everybody.